Hi! In this video, you will learn a little more about The Masque of the Red Death, a short story by Edgar Allan Poe. Are you ready? With The Masque of the Red Death, you will get in touch with one of the main short stories written by the father of modern horror, Edgar Allan Poe. Poe was born in Boston, USA in 1809. In only 40 years of life, he became a writer, poet, editor, and literary critic, and one of the most powerful voices in romantic literature. With a life marked by tragedies, starting with his mother's early death when he was only 2 years old, Poe entered the University of Virginia, where he studied ancient and modern languages, but didn't finish his degree. In 1827, Allan Poe published his first poetry book. From 1831 on, the author sought to develop his career as a writer, dedicating himself to prose. In 1836, he married Virginia Eliza Clan, and in 1839, he published Tales of Grotesque and Arabesque, a work organized in 2 volumes that leveraged his career as a writer, leading him to reach fame in his time. Due to the death of his wife in 1847 in Baltimore, Poe had a deep emotional shock. He died years later in 1849, of causes that remain unknown until today. The Masque of the Red Death, published in 1842, is an example of his best writing, being considered one of the most important texts by Edgar Allan Poe. This short story has comments and notes produced by Cassia Leslie. The illustrations and design were made by Roberta Assi. Even in digital times like the one we live in, it's important that you, as a young person, have contact with different aesthetic references, being literature an important source of them. Notice how many of the series and movies you enjoy are based on books. Stories that take place in different times than the one we live in are also important to know different lifestyles and societies than the ones we have today. In this context, when we return to the 19th century, we can see that it was a period full of scientific, economic, and social revolutions that definitely affected world history. It was when big cities and urban crowds emerged and the economy expanded due to industrialization. Conservative thoughts were questioned, women fought for rights, among many other important events. Edgar Allan Poe's short stories, like The Masque of the Red Death, present interesting characters, precise descriptions, chilling situations, tragic or enigmatic outcomes, with many meanings to be deciphered and that reverberated in the readers for a long time. Because of the shape of the stories, they are short and synthetic, and the language is direct and agile. The Masque of the Red Death has a plot that addresses the madness and insanity of some people in the face of a pandemic situation. It also demonstrates the lack of humanity in the face of the death of people who, unlike the most fortunate, do not have much to do to preserve and protect themselves. Although written in 1842, the theme is very current if we compare it to what we live with the COVID-19 pandemic that killed millions of people around the world. The Masque of the Red Death therefore presents a very interesting classic short story, especially for you, young reader. Thinking about that, the book's graphic design is an invitation to enrich the experience of the path through which we are led by Poe, adding to every chiming of the clock, just as in the story, a lapse of consciousness, a return to the present moment through the loose epigraphs on double pages of the same colors that predominate in the grand ballrooms, scenarios of this story. Edgar Allan Poe's short stories belong to the dark romanticism, literary subgenre of romanticism, whose main characteristics are melancholy and reflection on what escapes the rational, with emphasis on the fascination with the formation of human madness and evil. Romanticism was an art movement covering literature, painting, music, theater, and philosophy. In literature specifically, it emerged in Europe in the second half of the 18th century, with the publication of a German novel. However, Romanticism was also developed in France and England, extending itself to other continents. Its peak occurred between 1800 and 1890. One of the most interesting products of Romanticism was the Gothic style, whose novels emerged in the late 18th century and matured in the 19th century. Gothic literature incorporated new elements common to the 19th century, such as fear and dread of scientific progress, its strange machines, its new medical treatments, hypnotism, and the discovery of invisible enemies, such as disease causing bacteria and viruses, in addition to psychological disorders. The Masque of the Red Death is classified as a short story, but do you know what the characteristics of this literary genre are? As a written text, it is practiced from the 16th century to the present day, for its qualities of brevity and surprise, and for the great acceptance among readers. The short story has few characters, the time when the actions take place is limited, and it usually has one single and quite evident conflict. The short story's structure is formed by the elements: plot, time, space, characters, and narrator. Now you already know more about the author, his work, and its literary genre. With this knowledge in mind, you can enjoy reading this book that involves both fiction, mystery, and fantasy. It will certainly contribute to your development as an independent user of the English language.